It was a snowy night when I pulled into the parking lot of my gas station. I was working the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and had been doing it for a few months. I didn't really like my job, but it was really hard to find another job. And given other life circumstances, night shifts were the best fit for my personal schedule. Still, every night I went in exhausted and struggled to get through each shift. I parked my car in front of the parking lot, next to my colleague's car, which was the only other vehicle there anyway. He left after a few minutes, and by then it was just me. My manager had left a piece of paper on the desk with some work that needed to be done. But when I went through the paper, I didn't really think there was a lot of work. I estimated that it would take me at most an hour to complete all the tasks, so I tried to postpone doing them to buy some time before I went to sleep. But around 12:11, a car pulled into the station. When I looked outside, I saw an old SUV parked next to a gas pump. Of course, it was snowing outside, so most people weren't driving around, but it was normal to have the occasional customer. After watching a video on my phone for a while, I looked outside and the SUV was still there. The headlights were off and the doors were closed, as if it should have stopped there to refuel. But it had been there for so long that I approached and tried to look in the window. "Hello, is anyone inside?" I called out, but it was not easy to see if anyone was inside. Still, I didn't think anyone was inside. It was impossible to stay cooped up inside the car for so long. It was snowy, windy, and cold outside. Out of curiosity, I got out and ran towards the car. I looked around, but no one was there. Then I went to the window and tried to look inside. "Hello, is everything okay?" "I just came to check," I called out, but no one was at the window. Maybe there was someone inside, but I couldn't see them. Puzzled, I stepped back and looked around. There was no one around the car. After a while, as I shivered from the cold, I thought, I need to go inside and warm up a bit before I investigate this situation further. I went back inside and turned on the small heater next to the counter and put my hands in front of it to warm them. I was inside for maybe 30 seconds or a minute when there was a noise behind me. I immediately looked around, but I couldn't see anything. I took a step behind the counter and went into the maintenance room. Behind the shelf in the darkness, I could see the silhouette of a figure. It was a tall man with broad shoulders and a big beard, and he was looking directly at me. For a moment my heart stopped, but after the initial shock I could not react. I don't even know why. Maybe I couldn't react appropriately because of the shock. As I was feeding my eyes, I quietly picked up the store phone and called the police, asking for help. Then, as I waited for the most terrifying 10 minutes of my life, I didn't hear or see anything from the maintenance room. When the police arrived, they searched the store, but there was no one else inside. The man had disappeared. Dirty snow tracks led to the outside door, but outside, it was completely dark and leading into an empty field. No one knows what happened that night. The SUV was examined, but no information about the owner was found. We are left only with our memories of that night and the identity and intentions of the man, still unsolved. When we were in high school, my brother and I worked in a restaurant. It was a small restaurant located in a shopping center with only 8 or 9 branches. We both had the job of being waiters and waitresses, but because the place was small, we usually had to help with washing dishes, deliveries, or anything else that was needed. After working for about a year, my brother finished high school and decided to go to university. This happened a few months before he left work. I was working a later shift than I normally do on other weekdays. The restaurant was open until 12 a.m. every night, but I was usually done by 8 or 9 o'clock. That night, however, the manager received a delivery call around 10:30 p.m. By 11 p.m., I pulled my car out of the parking lot and set off for the address the manager had given me. But a few minutes later, I got a call from my manager. I answered it immediately, thinking it had been canceled, but he called back and said he had given me a wrong address. I had to pull over and write down the new address. When I entered the new streets and numbers into the GPS, I knew immediately that something was strange. The new address was not close at all. On the contrary, it was 25 minutes away and in the direction I needed to go. At first, I thought of going back to the restaurant and explaining the situation to the manager, because if this was an address that had not been hired, the order would not be accepted. But since I was already on my way and they were preparing the order, I didn't decide to go back. I said, let's finish the job and get rid of this awkwardness. So I continued on my way. The further I got from the city center, the emptier the roads became. I hadn't seen a car for the last 5 minutes. As I got closer to the edge of the city, grass and trees replaced the buildings and houses. When I reached the given address, I saw a row of houses, but all the lights were off. As I drove down the street, I saw that several houses corresponded to the given address, but the doors were closed and no one seemed to be inside. None of these houses were luxurious. They were all one-story box-style houses. When I arrived at the house where I was supposed to deliver the order, I was met with closed doors and silence. I knocked on the door and for a minute no one appeared. As time passed, I became more and more agitated, so I decided to put the bag down and go back to my car. Looking in, I stopped and I didn't know if the man heard me, but he immediately looked up and looked at me. "Do you need something?" I said, but the man didn't move. I took a step back and behind him I saw only trees and darkness. He wasn't moving. I asked again, but again I got no response. I felt a strange sensation. I looked around, but I could see nothing but trees. The man took a few steps back and stood 5 feet away from the door. For a few moments he just stared at me without moving from my seat. I started to walk nervously towards the car, but the man continued to stand still. As I walked slowly towards him, the man took a few steps back and stopped next to the door. We locked eyes for a moment. I carefully opened the door and went inside, but just before I closed the door, the man suddenly started shouting. I looked at him, and I could see 2, or maybe 3 figures in the woods, in the trees next to my car, running towards my car. Immediately I thought I was facing a trap and I jumped into the car without waiting for anything to happen. Before the car made a sound, the man next to me was still shouting. I immediately put the car in reverse and got out, preventing the man behind me from getting behind my car. The group of men started running towards me and I immediately drove away. The police were called and nothing much was found, but the door at the back of the restaurant had been smashed in and heavy tools had been left next to it. One of the most startling discoveries was the hole next to the entrance door in front of the restaurant, right next to the door, caused by the sound of a gunshot. Why the man had come in and targeted me was unknown. The police thought the man's behavior was some kind of mental breakdown or psychotic break. But since they did not have a specific reason for targeting me, their motive for specifically targeting a person was not understood. In my early 20s, I was working as a night shift leader in a retail store. This was a local store, not your average big chain, with only 8 or 9 branches. Usually I would work with a night clerk, but sometimes I would have to work alone. Tonight was one of those nights when I was on my own. In an environment that was usually quite quiet, I would do things slowly so that there was not much time to finish. It was exactly on one such night that a strange thing happened to me. At the beginning of my night shift, I loaded up a few boxes and moved out into the hallways and started to stock up. Since it didn't require any mental effort, my mind went elsewhere and I started thinking about random things. Suddenly, I heard a slap on the front door. At first, I didn't realize what it was because I was so distracted, but when I finally realized what it was, it felt really weird. The reason was that the store was closed and it was around 2 out. I walked to the large windshields overhead and looked out. The silence was broken by the surrounding silence. It was a snowy night outside and the whole area seemed to be frozen. At first, I didn't hear the sound, but then there was a second slapping sound, and this time I could see exactly where it came from. A man standing near the front door of the store seemed to have punched through the glass. I immediately decided to call the police, and then he started walking around inside the store, looking in through the window. I tried to stay quiet and not notice him, but after a while he started walking around inside the store. At first he walked with slow steps, but then he started to speed up. Sounds echoed off the walls and shelves. At first, I couldn't understand why he was here or what he wanted, but suddenly I felt him coming up behind me and I started running away, unable to do anything but scream. As I ran, the sound got faster. I circled around the store, wandering the aisles, but I could feel the voice traveling with me. The man running behind me came to the back door of the store. I quickly opened the door and jumped out. I felt that someone was still behind me, so I immediately ran to my car and jumped in. I locked the door and checked the windows and saw the man standing in front of the store door. We looked at each other for a moment, then he started running. I immediately put the car in reverse and backed up, and I saw that he was still approaching. When I got out of the car, I thought for a moment that he was running to attack me, but suddenly he stopped and disappeared. When the police arrived, there was no one in the store, but the glass of the back door had been smashed and heavy tools had been left next to it. The police could not find out who this person was or why he targeted me. His intent to attack or his mental state was unclear. The reasons behind him targeting only me and chasing me were not understood.